If you've ever wondered what tools your business needs inside of its IT department, then this conversation is for you. Tune in while I talk to a business owner about what he needs to put inside of his IT department to make sure he's ahead of all the other businesses in his industry.
The first one has got to be an RMM. An RMM stands for Remote Monitoring and Management Tool. And essentially, what this allows you to do is control all of your devices. So, what you do is you install an RMM agent on a device, an endpoint, and that allows you to see basically everything about the device. You can see CPU usage, memory usage, disk usage. You can run patches, you can run scripts. You also basically get an asset inventory of all of your devices. You can put them into different groups. They're all controlled in one place through a single pane of glass, as people like to say. I think that for MSP specifically, your RMM is like your absolute most important tool. You truly cannot live without it. There's quite a few vendors that make different RMM tools. There's Ninja RMM, Atera, ConnectWise Automate, Dado. There's tons of them out there. We personally use Ninja One because we think that's the best. So that's what we ended up settling on. But your life is really, really, really difficult if you don't have an RMM. And I personally wouldn't want to live without it because if you don't have an RMM, all of your devices, whether they're your business devices or your clients' devices, they're basically just out in the wild, and you have no way to wrangle them all in and keep them under control, and it's just an absolute disaster. So that is an RMM. I think that's the number one most important tool. Second to that is some sort of IT service management tool or ticketing system. So a ticketing system, basically what it does is it allows you to track different issues. So a user has an issue printing, they submit a ticket to the help desk, and then that ticket is like the single source of truth for everything regarding that one specific problem. I know I can kind of see the eyes rolling. I understand. I don't want to submit a ticket, but the ticket is so powerful because if it's not there, then things get lost, issues don't get resolved, and things aren't tracked properly. A lot of things happen inside of the ticket software or IT service management software. Like you can escalate it to other teams, you can run automated scripts based on certain criteria. So a ticketing system is absolutely paramount for your IT department. There's quite a few different ticketing systems out there: Jira, ServiceNow, Freshdesk, Zendesk. Some of those lean more towards the IT side of things. Some of those are just general help desk tools. But regardless, you got to have a ticketing system for your business. All right, moving on to number three, you got to have an endpoint management solution. So that kind of sounds a little bit like an RMM, but they're actually pretty different. So endpoint management is like Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Intune, Jamf for Mac devices. But what an endpoint manager allows you to do is basically set policies on devices. So maybe you have a password policy, and all passwords on physical devices need to be 12 characters. You can kind of write a script to do that with an RMM, but inside of an endpoint manager, you basically just create a policy and then it just goes out and it does all that stuff on the back end for you. So I know they sound pretty similar, but RMM and Endpoint Manager are both essential in my opinion. An RMM kind of lets you wrangle in all your devices, and an Endpoint Manager allows you to put policies on them to make them behave the way you want. Number four, you gotta have a remote access tool. So a remote access tool, it sounds pretty straightforward. It allows you to remote into a device. This is absolutely critical when managing servers and workstations remotely, and paramount when you're working with end users and they need remote support. You can remote into their desktop, you can see what problems they're experiencing, you can see exactly what's on their screen. They can take control of the session and like show you. They'll be like, well, I go here and then I go here and then this doesn't work. And you can see that live and you'll be like, okay, thank you, Mr. User. Let me take over and see what I can do for you. You do your fixes, the user sees you working on their workstation, and then their problem gets resolved. Absolutely essential to have a remote access tool. There's quite a few out there. Screen Connect is, in my opinion, the best one, but there's other ones like TeamViewer, AnyDesk, some RMMs, SplashTop 2. Some RMMs actually bundle in their own remote access tool. Like I believe SolarWinds has one called Take Control. Ninja has their own remote access tool called, I think it's just Ninja Connect. But regardless, another absolutely essential tool that you need to have inside of your IT department. All right, moving on, you got to have a cybersecurity tool, ideally a cybersecurity suite. So cybersecurity, it's this massive world and it's all in layers, right? The good cybersecurity comes in multiple forms. So you might have cybersecurity, a layer at email. You might have a layer on your users. You might have a layer on your network. You might have a layer on your endpoint. You have multiple layers of security. Ideally, you have a cybersecurity suite that provides you with all of these services in one platform, or you pick and choose the best for each layer. So you'll choose the best email protection software, the best endpoint detection software, the best extended detection and response software. But if you're just getting started and you just need something solid that helps you sleep at night, go with Huntress. There's tons of other vendors out there like Sentinel One, CrowdStrike, ESET, there's tons of them. But in my opinion, if you just need one for endpoint detection on your physical device, go with Huntress. It uses Windows Defender, which is actually pretty great now in 2024, but it has a team of real people that are actively looking into the insights that Windows Defender provides. That's the EDR and the XDR part. So would absolutely need a cybersecurity tool. Cool. So my next one that I would recommend is actually a network controller, especially if you have an office. If you're 100% remote, you might want to use a tool like Toidle, but if you have a physical building, inside of that building, you're going to have a couple of things. You're going to have a firewall or maybe multiple. You're going to have switches, probably multiple, and access points, which is most likely multiple. You need something to control all of these devices because if you don't have a network controller and you need to change the password on one of the Wi-Fi networks for your access point, you're going to have to SSH into the device itself, or you might even have to pull it off of the ceiling and plug a console cable into it, which is crazy. But you definitely don't want to be doing that. So what a network controller does is it allows all your devices, your networking devices, to connect to this central location. And then inside of those central location, you can make changes just like you would with an RMM. So inside of our network controller, we deploy a lot of unified devices. We can see every single access point, every single firewall, every single switch for all of our clients. And if we want to make a change, maybe the password needs to be updated for the Wi-Fi network, pop into the portal, change the Wi-Fi password, and it just automatically provisions out to all of the devices. It's super seamless. And it also gives you some fantastic insights into the network itself. So you can see bandwidth utilization, you can see your DHCP tables, you can see your DNS, you could tons of cool things you can do inside of your network controller that I would highly recommend you having. All right, so this next one might come out a little bit out of left field, but I think that you really need a print management software. So for the longest time, print servers were a thing. You would have a print server probably on your domain controller. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's a separate VM, but it's usually not. And that would connect to all the printers in the office, and the workstations would just send remote jobs to the print server. In 2024, with work from home, distributed workforces, you need more of a comprehensive solution. So we use a tool called Printix. There's another one called PaperCut. But what Printix does, kind of like an RMM, it's an agent that sits on the computer, and all of your printers are just managed in a portal in the cloud. It automatically deploys and registers all the printers to all your endpoints. And you could also do cool stuff like print remotely. So you could be on the other side of the world. You don't have to be connected to a VPN, and you can print a document to your desk and it'll be there the next morning for you when you go into work. So some cool, super cool things you can do with print management softwares like that. All right, the last tool you need is a backup and disaster recovery solution. So backup is one of those things where everyone says, yo, we really need to have it, but you don't really know how bad you need to have it until you need to have it. I would always recommend backing up full disk images of mission critical devices. So like servers do full disk images. Virtual machines, put the agent on your hypervisor and back up the VMs individually. For workstation files, I typically recommend doing OneDrive for Business known folder move, which moves your desktop, your documents, and your pictures to OneDrive. Automatically, it's all synced. That also gives the added benefit of if you're in an Azure AD environment and moving to a different computer, all those things stay synced, like your typical Active Directory type environments with folder relocation. As far as some of the vendors, In the backup and disaster recovery world, you've got VM, you've got Acronis, SolarWinds has their own called, I think it's called Cove Backup. But what all of these allow you to do is choose what you want to back up, whether it's a disk image, whether it's a folder, or whether it's a VM, and move that data to the cloud. And then you can restore it in multiple ways. So if it was a folder, you could just restore it back to the original device. You could download it to a workstation and do whatever you want with it. A lot of them also support something called bare metal restore, which allows you to take basically just a picture of the computer and just get it back to that exact picture if something catastrophic happens, like the hard drive dies or the motherboard starts on fire. And that's super powerful to have, especially with older applications where the company that made the software might not even be around anymore, and you can't like get a new installer for the app you need to install. If you don't have a disk image backup, it's pretty tough, if not impossible, to get that software back up and running. So I would absolutely recommend a backup and disaster recovery solution. I would also recommend you look at your strategy and do 3-2-1 backups. So the 3-2-1 backup strategy means that you have 3 copies of your data, which is the original, and 2 copies. 2 different types of media. So you could have an external hard drive, a NAS, something in the cloud, and then one of those copies is offsite. That means that if the building blows up, which we hope it doesn't, of course, that copy of data will still be accessible somewhere outside of the physical building. It's a disaster recovery scenario. I'd also make sure that your backup strategy is good for your business needs. So maybe you have a super important folder and you need 15-minute backup periods of that data. Make sure to configure that in your software. Maybe you have some data that you only need backed up monthly, but make sure you take a look at what you actually need and make sure that your IT department puts those policies in for you, because it really sucks if you need 15 minutes intervals of data and you only have the last 90 days. Like, that's kind of a bummer. So those are my 8 essential tools that I think that every IT department needs. If you're enjoying this content, click subscribe. Every single week, I'm dropping new content on growing your business through tech, eliminating cybersecurity threats, and turning IT into a true profit center. You do not want to miss out on this stuff.